Namaskar and good morning, friends, and welcome once again. As proposed in the previous class, we are going to talk about one of the most coveted novels by an Indian in the modern era, Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. And this has been rated very high uh, because it was a trained setter when it was published, and is known for its stylistic variations as much as its use of magic realism, and especially blending fiction and history. Um, and again, turns out to be a prism to look at the uh, nation called India, which was born on the midnight of 15th August 1947, again uh, getting freedom from the Britishers. So, in yesterday's class, friends, we talked about Salman Rushdie as a writer, and we found that he commands a lot of respect and critical acclaim in the critical or literary parlance, and his contributions are immense when it comes to you know uh, Indian diaspora. When we talk about diaspora, sometimes we just believe that diaspora is only about people uh, crossing borders. But then sometimes, we can find that somebody, the writer himself, is part of diaspora, and his fiction is informed by his own personal experiences of diaspora that have somehow resulted in a confused identity or fractured identity, a perpetual sense of rootlessness or unbelongingness, and that might reflect even if the setting happens to be somewhere else. So if we talk about Midnight's Children, we don't have the same kind of definition of diaspora being applied, but nonetheless it is important because it basically talks about the same psychological and sociological problems that are faced by diasporic people. So if you recall, earlier I told you that people migrating to Pakistan, Bangladesh, uh, they may not be exactly termed Indian diaspora because this happened to be one single country, and because of the political turmoil and the machinations of the colonial powers, we got separated, and first partition resulted in the creation of a new country, Pakistan, and later on within Pakistan also, there was bifurcation in 1971 when Bangladesh became independent. So, in this particular novel, we'll find that our characters don't move out of India or Indian subcontinent, but still they, experience the same psychological uncertainty or precariousness as experienced by the diasporic people. And again, any talk about modern diaspora, Indian diaspora in particular, will not be complete unless and until we talk about this magnum opus by Salman Rushdie, one of the most vociferous and most renowned figures of Indian diaspora. So, this book has been rated as one of the top 100 books of the modern time, and obviously commands lot of respect from the critics around the world. So, it was the second novel by Salman Rushdie which got published in 1981. It won the Booker Prize in 1981, the Booker of Booker's Prize in 1993, and the Best of Booker Prize in the year 2008. And you can just look at its accomplishments and can feel what respect it commands in the critical and literary parlance. And as I said, it is known for its use of magic realism, where the novelist, blends the real with the magical and creates a world which transports us in the world of the narrator. And obviously, you know talks about very complex psychological experiences through this style of magic realism. If we try to understand magic realism, which is basically, it is attached with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, one of the Colombian stalwarts who used it very effectively, especially in his 100 Years of Solitude, which is considered a masterpiece when it comes to any talk about employing magic realism as a literary technique. So, something about this magic realism, it's a literary style that combines fantastical and supernatural elements with realistic settings and narratives. So, the mundane suddenly becomes magical or mystical, and it transports us from the world of everyday to the magical world of the narrative. And such is its fascination that when we read such texts, we hardly believe what is presented is something that is mundane and real. So it presents magical events as normal, blurring the line between reality and imagination. But yes, the novelist does it in such a way that it all looks so natural and spontaneous rather than something that is imposed. And so this is about its beauty. So it is often used in post colonial literature. It explores the cultural, political, and historical themes through serial yet believable storytelling. So, and if we talk about its ingredients, the essential ingredients that magic realism includes, it's a mundane real world setting. So the setting is very much everyday setting, ordinary yet complex characters. The characters look ordinary, people like us, but then they are complex and layered, often with fantasy or magical traits placed upon them. So when we look at, Midnight's Children, we'll find how Salim Sinai is especially gifted and is blessed with supernatural powers, telepathy, his ability to see through the events and also connect to all the children, the Midnight's Children, the children born on the midnight of 15th of August 1947, the children of independence. So, ordinary yet complex characters, often with fantasy or magical traits placed upon them, a non linear, cyclical, or fluid sense of time. And for instance, this technique blends the real and the fantastical, the sense of time as we experience it in our ordinary world does not exist. Rather, it replicates itself and it is moving in a cyclical direction rather than moving in a linear direction. It is distinct, polished prose with an authorial voice. So Salman Rushdie himself writes, and I quote, when people use the term magic realism, usually they often mean magic and they don't hear realism, whereas the way in which magic realism actually works is uh, you know, for the magic to be rooted in the real, it's both things. It's not just a fairy tale moment. So he cautions us against looking at magic realism only as something magical and not real, because the actual purpose is presenting the actual but in a magical way. So when we look at Midnight's Children, which is employing this technique of magic realism so successfully that critic after critic have taken it as one of the masterpieces, it was published in 1981. As I said, it deals with the themes of migration, displacement, identity, and belongingness. Although migration does not mean crossing the Indian subcontinent and landing in another country. But earlier also we have seen that migrations may be internal or external. So, the theme of migration relates to the rootlessness of the family of the narrator, which migrates from one part of India to another and then to Pakistan and Bangladesh. And, the narrator himself, not the family, but yeah, the family moves to Pakistan as well. So, we find that migration, displacement, identity, their identities get transformed, get complex, uh, get hazy with the passage of time, and you know their sense of belongingness is always questionable, because they keep on moving from one place to another, and they nowhere feel really connected. So the novel deals with themes of migration, displacement, identity, and belongingness that are typical of any diasporic narrative. It weaves together themes of cultural identity, historical context, magical realism, individual versus collective identity, memory, storytelling, and language, as Parmeshwari and Raz observe. So, this novel abounds in the themes that are typically associated with diaspora. And obviously, why? Because, the writer himself is the diasporic and has always been grappling with these questions of cultural identity, historical contextualization of identity, and individual versus collective identity, memory, and so on and so forth. So, the issue of diaspora is explored through the migrations of Salim Sinai's family within the Indian subcontinent, as I said, driven by political and economic factors. Earlier, also, we talked about various push and pull factors resulting in the migration of population from one place to another. In this novel, also, we find that because of political and economic factors, the Sinai family moves from, let's say, Jammu and Kashmir to Agra to Delhi to Bombay and to Pakistan. And Salim Sinai himself, also moves to Bangladesh. So, the novel depicts their continuous search for stability amidst India's post independence chaos. So, if we look at the novel, it's difficult to summarize such a huge novel. It has different sections, but nonetheless, I'm trying to tell you uh, about this story in brief so that you can really contextualize it. I, however, recommend you to go through the whole novel in order to really appreciate our discussion. So, the story follows Salim Sinai, born at the exact moment of India's independence in 1947, whose life is magically intertwined with the fate of the nation, switched at birth with another boy, Siva. Salim grows up believing he is from a wealthy family while Siva is raised in poverty, but the fact is, it is otherwise. Siva, who is born to a wealthy parents, is switched with Salim, who is born in a poor family and who is a Hindu, not a Muslim, but he happens to be sent to a Muslim family and grows up there. And not only that, it's interesting that he traces his growth through the story of that Muslim family and believes that he is one of them. And even they also take him to be one amongst them, even if this has been disclosed at a later point in time by the lady who had swapped the children. The Salim's parents don't believe in that and continue to treat him as their own child. So both, along with hundreds of other children born in the first hour of independence, possessed supernatural abilities. It is believed that the midnight of 1947 was magical, and in that magical moment when India got freedom from the British, from the coercive rule of the British for hundreds of years, the children who were born were treated as a good omen for the country. So the novelist believes that they have been endowed with supernatural abilities, and Salim's is telepathy. Out of all the children who are endowed with these supernatural abilities, Salim's is telepathy, which he uses to connect to the midnight children, who together mirror the diversity and conflicts of India itself. So Salim's personal and family history unfolds against major historical events: partition, wars, political upheavals, and the emergency under Indira Gandhi. As Salim's life crumbles, so does the hope of unity among the Midnight's children, who are eventually rounded up and sterilized during the emergency. So when the story opens, we find that Salim, has been writing his memoir, and is also talking to Padma, his friend, who is sort of sympathetic listener and critic, and whose interventions are also part of this narrative. And Salim does not talk about uh, his life from the beginning. Rather, he talks about his grandfather, and this is how he talks about a family history, you know um, at the time of which he was not part of the narrative, but nonetheless, given his ability to look through time, he talks about his grandfather, his father, and then he comes to his own life. The novel ends with Salim recounting his story before his impending death, symbolizing the fragmentation and endurance of both individual and national identity. So, in between, we find how Salim, talks about the family undergoing lot of changes, change of place, change of their economic fortune, and whatnot, actually. So, this change is symbolic of the turmoil or the chaos that is part of Indian history at that point in time as well. And it comes as a device by the novelist that whenever something of consequence happens in the personal lives of characters, there is something of consequence that happens at the global level or the broad level. So, all these stories, personal and collective, personal and, let's say, global, they are mixed together. So when the grandfather of Salim finally gets married to his grandmother after courtship for a couple of years, it's the end of World War One. And likewise, at a later moment, we find that the day Japan is bombed, something of consequence happens in the life of the characters of the novel. So, through a diverse cast of characters and intricate storytelling, Rushdie, investigates the complex blending of traditions, beliefs, and influences that shape the characters' sense of self and relationship with their nation. So it provides a rich tapestry of Indian culture, to say the least. The novel beautifully explores the themes of cultural identity and hybridity, and it is set against India's rich cultural tapestry, as I said, where various ethnicities, languages, religions, and traditions coexist, representative of this diversity, embodying the hybrid nature of cultural identity in a country marked by centuries of cultural interplay. So, the interactions of the characters with colonial rulers, their education in English, and their exposure to Western ideas lead to a fusion of indigenous and foreign influences, and this hybridity reflects the complex of identity in a nation grappling with the legacies of colonialism. So, friends, we have seen that these diasporic writers, even earlier we saw how V.S. Naipaul and later Kamla Markande, they also talked about the impact of colonialism on the recently independent countries and their cultural chaos and confusion resulting out of their confused identity and their confused ideas. So, we find the same thing happening here, although India has been free, but still it is not out of the shadow of colonial rule, and many of the colonial legacies still hold firm, and that's why it leaves them in utter chaos rather than restoring them the real kind of order and prosperity that they might have envisioned at the time of independence. Language becomes a prism through which cultural identity is refracted, and in the novel, we find a curious mix of languages: Urdu, Hindi, English, and other languages. They are mixed, and that shows the multicultural, pluralistic Indian society. So, language becomes a prism through which cultural identity is refracted. Characters switch between languages, creating a linguistic tapestry that mirrors India's multilingual reality. The novel also deals with the themes of displacement and rootlessness caused by relocation, as Saha observes, and as I told you, that the family of the protagonist Salim Sinai suffers from displacement and rootlessness because they start from Jammu and Kashmir. His grandfather himself was a trained physician from Germany, and when he came back from Germany, he found that the life in Jammu and Kashmir is completely different for him. There has been a history of rootlessness in the family, and for instance, the protagonist Salim Sinai himself wanders among three countries: India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, but is unable to find a proper place to live in. In between, there is also loss of memory for him, and this is symbolic of how Indians, because of their colonial subjugation, fell in the trap of amnesia, forgetting all about their grand culture. So many of its characters are migrants drifting from shore to shore in search of some imaginary homelands, and Salim became circumstantially homeless due to the partition between India and Pakistan. His family left Kashmir in order to get settled in the adopted land Pakistan. Hence, Salim's loss of home, along with his hybrid and uncertain identity, has emerged from the partisan shock and horror. And Salim's story strengthens the cross border and transnational dilemmas and the various issues of diasporic identity, as Paul concludes. So, we find that although uh, the novel does not really fit in our understanding of the definition of a post colonial diaspora, in which people cross borders and go distant places to different places, because if we look at Pakistan and Bangladesh, that used to be once a part of India itself, and also culturally they are more or less the same. So, the thing of cultural shock or cultural confusion, that is not associated with this kind of migration. Salim, being the mouthpiece of Rushdie, expresses the feelings, experiences, and predicaments that the common diasporic and migrated victims face globally while living in an adopted land. So, that is why I say that although it was not tended to be a narrative of diaspora in the sense the other novels have been, where the characters have migrated from India to other places, or from other places to far off places, uh, it still has the same experiences and concerns, and bears a testimony to the diasporic experiences of the writer Salman Rushdie. The protagonist Salim becomes a dog, a member of the Kutia unit in his first migrated country, that is Pakistan. Subsequently, his entire body has gone fully numb, and he has been active, inactive, except his nose that gave him the supernatural power. His fellow soldiers used to call him Buddha or Old Man because he was the embodiment and representative of old India, and there was an air and flavor of great antiquity around him, although he was only 24 years of age. So we find all happening in this novel, and we also find how Salim, finds a resemblance with his grandfather, and the family knows, because he also shares a unique long big nose with his family members. And it's interesting to see that although he is not biologically connected to them, but still he traces his genuine lineage in the family history of this family. And symbolically, Salman Rushdie probably hints at our coexistence together, although the different communities are not really connected through a blood relation. So when we look at this novel as a diasporic text, as I said earlier, it talks about the experiences that are typically associated with diaspora, like homelessness, rootlessness, cultural identity, and so on and so forth. When we look at it, it is spiced up with many such powerful lines that directly relate to diasporic experience. So look at this particular line in in my family, we always go where we are pushed. So it talks about the diasporic push factor, where people don't always have a choice, but rather they are forced. So it refers to the forced migration, because the Sinai family does not decide for itself, but the circumstances push them from Kashmir to Agra to Delhi and to Mumbai, and then to Pakistan, and then Sinai goes to Bangladesh as well. Alienation and sense of belonging, which is typical of any diasporic experience, is also applicable in this changed sensibility of Salim's grandfather, who comes back to Kashmir after his studies abroad, as I said, and finds that his own sensibility has changed, and he does not feel the same kind of emotional connect, or the same kind of same kind of feeling for Jammu and Kashmir, which used to be there once before his living for abroad. So he looks at his own world with a borrowed eye of a visitor, and I quote, and this is one of the most prominent lines in the story. Now, returning, he saw through troubled eyes. Instead of the beauty of the tiny valley circled by giant teeth, he noticed the narrowness, the proximity of the horizon, and felt sad to be at home and feel so utterly enclosed. So, basically, we always feel that home is liberating, and this might also be an allegorical representation of the feeling of India as a nation at that point in time. Indians always wanted to be an independent nation, but at that point in time, when they are looking at their own world with colonial eyes, because the subjugation for centuries has altered their own sensibility, has forced them to look at their own life with borrowed eyes from their colonial masters. they look at it and they feel that it is chaotic. So he is not aware of his emotional connect at this point in time. Rather, he feels that his broad mindedness, which has been caused by his travels abroad, suddenly finds this place alien because it looks so small and so narrow for his broader horizon of thought. So, obviously, he feels alienated in his own world, which is not expected of him, and his sense of belonging, which once used to be there, is something which is questionable at this point in time because he does not feel the same kind of emotional connect to his own place having returned from abroad. There is shift in identity shaped by migration. This is again a very important theme in most of the diasporic texts, where we find that when the people cross their borders and land in a new place, their identities change, and these identities are shaped by their migration and other factors in the host country. So, look at this particular line, I started off as a Kashmiri and not much of a Muslim. Again, let's see that Kashmiris, they always believe that they have a different culture and they somehow feel different from the majority of Muslims in other parts of the country. I started off as a Kashmiri and not much of a Muslim. Then I got a bruise on the chest that turned me into an Indian. I'm still not much of a Muslim, but I am all for Abdullah is fighting my fight. So, I mean, this again, changing loyalty, changing subjectivity, changing identity through migration, this is also one of the themes. Assimilation and trace of origin after migration. Well, Salim's parents said, we must all become new people. In the land of the pure, purity became our ideal, but Salim was forever tainted with babiness. So, Bombayness, because Bombay became his new home. So, like the people from Kashmir, they moved to a metropolitan center like Bombay, and obviously they find it too huge, too diverse culturally to adjust to that, and so they have to refashion themselves in order to survive. And this is again one of the most prominent themes when it comes to diasporic texts. So, if we look at some more description of the novel, we'll find how it talks about fragmented identities, it talks about migration, it talks about nostalgia, because these people often talk about their life in uh, Kashmir, and it talks about the personal experiences. Language and storytelling itself is layered, and it mixes Hindi, English, Urdu, and street slang. And this playful, inventive language reflects the cultural mixture and in betweenness that also characterizes diasporic experience. Hybridity, which Bhabha talks about, is also one of the prominent themes. So, right in the beginning, we find that the protagonist talks about being swapped, and so he himself is part Hindu and part Muslim and part British, because he is born out of a British parent to a Hindu mother, and then has been swapped and has been raised up in a Muslim family. But ultimately, he is neither one thing nor the other, just like India itself. Um, so, whose India is this, or what makes India? That question is also paramount. In fact, India is a multicultural, pluralistic nation, and cultural hybridity is something that is found everywhere. So, if I quote one line from the novel, to understand just one life, you have to swallow the world. It sums up the diasporic individuals like Salim, who have to uh, not only look at their lives in terms of their personal identity, because it is tangled with huge global histories as such. So, loss and longing for home, fragmented identity, movement across borders, physical and emotional, they are all part of this story, and make it a very effective diasporic text. Ultimately, Midnight Children's Diaspora is not just about physical migration, it's about emotional dislocation, confused memories, unstable identities, and invented homelands. So, friends, so this turns out to be one of the most powerful diasporic narratives, both in terms of its themes and styles and treatment, and you know, uh, is very rich in details. And if we look at it, it talks about identity, hybridity, memory and storytelling, partition and migration, nation and belonging, and all these discussions directly relate to the experiences of diasporic subjects. So, friends, thank you very much for your company in this particular class, where we talked about one of the masterpieces of modern times and all times for that matter, by Salman Rushdie. In the next class, again, we'll talk about another novel, although it is different, but it is also one of the most effective novels by Salman Rushdie. We'll talk about The Moor's Last Sigh. So, till then, these are the references, and thank you very much. We'll meet again. Thank you.